Welcome back to the Command Your Brand Show. I'm your host, Jeremy Ryan Slate, the CEO and co-founder of Command Your Brand. We help our clients to make a big impact in the new media space. You can check us out over at commandyourbrand.com. Reminder, if you're brand new to this channel, like this video, leave us a comment and smash that subscribe button if you want to command your brand. I'm excited for the guest we have with us today because she's one of the people I actually featured in my book, Unremarkable to Extraordinary, a number of years ago. She has an incredible story. We're not really going to dive into her entire story today because we have a new conversation lined up, but definitely want to check out our prior interview with her. But Kara Goldin, thank you so much for coming back on the show today.
Well, thank you for having me.
So Kara, for people that may not be familiar with you and what you do, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
So I'm probably best known for starting a brand that many people are familiar with called Hint Water, which I started in 2005 when I was trying to get myself healthy. I was a tech executive. I was not a CPG or beverage or food executive, but I really saw this problem in my own life around diet sweeteners that I was trying to solve for myself and also trying to get my own family off of sugar and realizing that the key thing was just making water taste better. So took an idea, took it into Whole Foods and said, hey, how do I get a product on the shelf? And it was really that easy. Not really. I mean, it was, building a brand was clearly something that, frankly kind of came off of the heels of solving a problem, which the more I've looked at, and frankly, I think, Jeremy, the more I've seen what you've looked at, it really sort of stems from if you can identify a problem and sort of, something that you maybe have in common with other people along the way, that it makes building a brand actually much easier.
And it's interesting too, and you can correct me on this too, because I'm trying to do this from memory, but there's a story that you told that I feel like I tell it to everybody. And it's about when Hint was kind of finally starting going and you were out of stock in the store. And I think you were like in labor or close to labor and you were like ordering more stock. And it's funny because I feel like I've told that story so often about like really being committed to your business. Am I close to that story?
You are absolutely very, very close. I was delivering our fourth child, who's now in college, and and he always thinks that he was there when Hint first started, and I guess he was because I delivered him that afternoon in a planned C-section, and I had decided that if I could just get our first bottle on the shelf and get some of the clutter out of our house, which were pallets of Hint that were sitting in the garage and in my parking space that I wanted back, that I could actually, kill two birds with one stone, so to speak. And little did I know that that would be the beginning and that I could actually do it. It was sort of a tiny little goal that I think a lot of people think of, nesting when you're getting ready to actually go into labor. I know, Jeremy, you just had that experience. I don't know if your wife was the same way, but I'm like, if I could just do this one more thing, right? And that's what it was.
We bought this house a few years ago because it had a lot of property. It's I think 5 or 6 acres because we have chickens and pigs and all that kind of stuff. And it's like 100-something-year-old farmhouse. And so we're always kind of like, I'm just somebody that I'm very capable. So I'm always like doing a lot of projects. I enjoy a good project. I built a new fence yesterday, but my wife is always got something for me, especially right before labor. So I painted like 5 rooms and I, put up a new fence and did this and did that. So I totally understand.
That's awesome. Very, very fun.
So let me ask you this, because I think the thing that's really cool about Hint, not just being able to walk through in the store and be like, oh, I've talked to her before. That's so cool. But I think also like your brand, as you mentioned, really solved a problem that you had. And I think when you look at that, can you describe to me, I guess, in your mind, when you're creating an authentic brand, and I guess why it worked for you and why I think, people should be considering that? Because I think it's interesting. You mentioned it before we started recording. There's some people that are pushing it too hard. They're not really, being real with it. So from your perspective, when you're really creating a brand that lasts, how do you, I guess, go in that direction?
Yeah, I think that it really starts with identifying a problem. I think so many people come up with an idea, and it's the get rich quick scheme, right? Where they're going to develop a product, they're going to sell it, and they're going to be the next billionaire, right? In the time that I was starting Hint, the number of people who said to me, "Oh, like 50 Cent made all this money on vitamin water. You guys are going to kill it," and I just kept thinking, I mean, that would be nice at the end of the day. But for me, it really started with this problem that I had around diet sweeteners. And the only reason why I sort of got off the track of continuing in tech, frankly, was and deciding to, start my own beverage company when I had no idea what I was doing and invest my own money and all of those things, was because I felt like I could help a lot of other people. And it ends up that if you can actually solve a problem, you can actually help a lot of other people solve a problem that they have, which may not actually be the exact same problem that you have. That is influential. And so when you think about that, I think that crosses over into many, many different entrepreneurs.
So let me ask you this then, because I think that the thing that can be difficult is, you mentioned that pivot from being a tech CEO to being somebody in the health space and developing more of a health-oriented product, right? And I guess the thing that can be difficult for people sometimes is making that pivot, but making it feel real and authentic, right? I know even for me, way back when I went to school, like my master's degree is in the Roman Empire, right? And I've been doing this podcasting thing and all this stuff for, 15 years now. And then when it came up in the news about Roman Empire, I started doing a lot of media appearances about it. And initially people were kind of like, wait, he's doing what? Because they didn't know that about me. So that pivot was weird for them. And I guess when you're looking at a pivot, how do you do it correctly and also, put the right energy behind it?
Well, I think it goes back to what you and I were just discussing. I think that if you didn't go and start talking about this because you necessarily wanted to build a brand, right? You just had a lot of information and you had thoughts about it. And
Sure.
and so
it was kind of fun.
yeah, and it was fun. But it ends up that if you like, so often I see, like I said earlier, that I see entrepreneurs really trying to force it, right? They're trying to, develop the next product. And in the beverage industry, for example, the number of products that I've seen that are like Me Too products, where they're, maybe I'll pick on vitamin water for a minute, but there's been so many knockoff products to vitamin water that people thought, okay, if vitamin water can do it, then I can go do it too. But the reality is that there's a lot of other pieces to it. And if you're not passionate about what you're doing, if going back to your example, if you, let's say somebody says, I want to go be, Jeremy, and I'm going to go do it. Like, there's a lot that went into you having an interest of the Roman Empire and all of your knowledge and all of your schooling. And you've been, studying it. Not to say that experience is, kind of, I always say that experience doesn't necessarily trump, and probably doesn't trump like passion. You had an interest and a passion for that topic, and that shows. And I think if you have that, that's really the key to the kingdom, so to speak. That is the thing that is going to allow you to become an expert, become known for doing that kind of thing. And I think that really goes back to being able to tell the story of your why. And the why isn't necessarily solving a problem either. The why could be, why you got interested in something. And I think that really is relevant for so many consumers, so many people who, want to listen to you or not listen to you, because if they can really understand that there's a passion there, passion is something that people are, they gravitate towards, right? If they believe that it's real and it's authentic, if they believe that it's made up or that they're being sold a bill of goods in some way, then they're not going to listen. And so I think it's very, very difficult to fake a passion for something, fake a belief that that something is, important if you don't really think it is.
I think it goes back to the personal experience piece, like you were talking about, like, especially like when you created Hint, you're creating something because you wanted to solve a problem you had. Like, so it's something real to you. And I think far too often there's people they're just trying to create another business idea, or they're just trying to get something out of it or create motion with it. And I think to create something that's real, it also helps you to differentiate better from those in your market. And I'm curious, when we look at that, and when you're thinking of a product like Hint, or thinking of yourself as a personal brand, how have you looked at differentiating to stand out from those in the pack? Because even, going back to Hint, there's products like seltzer out there. There's things that have been around for a long time, but Hint has staying power, and it's been around for, quite a while now. And it has a place on a lot of shelves and a lot of stores. So how do you differentiate to grab that space?
So when Hint was started, I never thought that I knew we were creating a new product and a company and brand, but I didn't really understand that we were actually creating an entirely new category in the beverage industry. And that category was unsweetened, still flavored water. Eventually, we launched a carbonated version of the product because the more we were talking to consumers about Hint and an unsweetened flavored water, they were like, okay, I get it. I like it, but I like carbonation. Why don't you have carbonation? And so we ended up launching that as well, knowing that often when you have more than one person living in the house, there's a greater than 50% chance that one of those people like carbonation and the other one like still. And so we kept hearing this from consumers over and over again. But I think that there's a couple of things. First of all, not swaying from what the core product is that you're launching with, unless you're going to totally blow up the entire concept and say we were wrong and own it and say we're going to totally go in a different direction. But I think not confusing the consumer. We were never moving away from the still water, the carbonation, the Hint. We weren't adding sweeteners to the product. And I think that when you've got the consumer, the core thing to figure out is, can I actually find more consumers that have that belief too, or maybe haven't gotten to where our initial consumers are? It's kind of like podcasting, right?
Yeah.
You want to continue to find the audiences. If you believe that you're solving a problem for a lot of people, you just have to figure out how to allow more people to know about you. Then I think you can continue to build that brand. I think where the problem comes in is that if the consumer has a very difficult time understanding what you stand for, and again, that could be a physical product, that could be a podcast, but if they don't really understand we call it a 30-second elevator speech, right? What do you stand for and what do you represent? Then I think it's very, very difficult for people to understand why they should be buying your product or listening to you.
So let me ask you that then, because I think that's something that's important. How do you decide what your brand stands for? And I guess, can that change over time, right? Because I think sometimes consumers are fine with it and sometimes they're not. So I guess let's start with that. So how do you start with what a brand stands for? And then I guess after that, we could take a look at, can that change over time?
Yeah, I think it starts, I think you could probably get a lot of different opinions on this, but I think it really starts with solving a problem and really understanding, first of all, what is the problem that you're solving for? And is there an audience that wants your help? Right. And I think that if you believe that audience is big and also isn't going to alienate people in some ways, and I'll explain about that in a minute, then I think that you continue to build on that brand message. You can also have sub messages below. So I'll give you a great example. When we first started Hint, I was trying to get off of diet sweeteners, and I was also trying to drink more water. And I thought, if water just tasted better, if I had a product that was that really helped me to drink more water, the key problem for me was that I wanted water to taste better. I liked carbonation. I didn't have any issues with carbonation, but I couldn't drink 8 glasses of carbonated water every day.
Oh
Right.
my gosh, you'd have stomach discomfort.
Right. And so for me, I just kept wanting to drink more water. A week after we launched Hint, I started hearing from consumers that this was in our local Whole Foods in San Francisco, that they had found our product. They were writing to the drinkhint.com on the back of the bottle, and that they were sharing all of this information about different health issues that they had. I got a couple of emails from people who were pregnant that were trying to give up diet sweeteners while they were pregnant. But then I also received emails from people, one in particular from a gentleman who told me about something that I had never heard of called type 2 diabetes. This is in 2005. And I'd heard of type 1 diabetes, but I had never heard of type 2 diabetes. And so I reached out to him and said, do you mind if I give you a call? It's a brand new brand. I'm really interested because I never really thought of launching this brand for this reason. And so he went on to, share with me that he was an ultra marathoner and that, he was embarrassed by the fact that he had diabetes because it just sort of cropped up on him, which for him meant that he wasn't necessarily born with this, that something he had been doing over the years had really caused this in some way. And, nobody really knew that much about type 2 diabetes back in 2005. And so he was drinking our product to help him get off of diet sweeteners. He didn't lead when he was talking to me about the brand with the idea that he wanted to drink more water, but he shared with me, okay, well, that's good too. I guess, drinking water is not a bad thing. But here he was drinking our product because he was trying to solve a health issue. Now, when you go back to my core reason for launching Hint, I wanted to solve a health issue for me too, which was around drinking more water and giving up diet sweeteners. But do you want to go out with a message that says, hey, we're an amazing product for people with type 2 diabetes? It's a fact that there's consumers that are drinking it. But if that's a segment of the population, even though it's a growing segment, I think that you run the risk of alienating people that are not that don't have that issue, right? The same with pregnant women. I've had people who have said to me, I drink your product. I drink Hint all the time. My wife brought it home when she was pregnant. Is it okay that I drink it too? These are men who are, really enjoying the product. I'm like, of course it is. But again, you don't want to confuse the consumer by trying to focus in on these, segments and groups. But at the end of the day, the brand really, I think, and the brand promise for this consumer is really helping people get and stay healthier.
I think that is a vital point, Kara. And I've run a PR agency now since 2016. So we talked to so many clients over the years about this. And I think that is the number one thing, because it's a balance between niching enough, but not niching too much. And I think sometimes people try to niche so far that the audience is so small that it's going to take you a long time to really make an impact if you can last long enough to make an impact, right? It's a balance between having the right niche and not niching too far.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I remember when we were first launching, and I knew a lot less about PR and kind of messaging back then. And I remember we were going out with some messaging around the fact that, here's a mom, a mother of 4 kids, and she got her product launched into Whole Foods on the day that she was delivering her baby. And I would say now that, I mean, it's a true story. It's in my book. It's something that is, memorable. But how many people were turned off by that because somehow or another they had twisted it in their mind that this was a drink for, maternity patients. I don't know. Sure. Or maybe they don't like kids. Maybe they're not married. Maybe they're not ever going to have a baby or they can't have a baby. Like, I think that that's the thing that you have to just be so careful. And so I've always, said to other entrepreneurs that you definitely have to explain what your mission is, but in it, you have to be careful that you're not going out with those subtopics. Maybe those are hooks, but you have to really be careful about going out with it too much so that you're not identified always by, I guess, that story and that point.
So let me ask you this then. I guess going back to the second part of the question, can a brand change that in the future, right? Because if you have a brand that's around for a long time, well, economies change, culture changes, things change. Can a brand change without alienating their audience?
Yeah, but I think you have to take your audience with you, or else I think you can definitely change a brand. But again, I think that you have to catch people up, right, on sort of where you're going and own that something didn't work along the way. And I think that that's a really important piece, right? If you're going to step away from something along the way, like especially if you were putting, stakes in the ground around a certain topic, then you have to be able to, I think, really own that and then say, okay, you may have heard that we went out with this message. Otherwise, I think you confuse the consumer, and I think that you lose trust with that consumer as well. And I think that that's a really, really important piece. And I'm trying to remember, I feel like there was one, I think, who was it? I think it was Adidas with Kanye. I remember when they went out, I thought they did a really good job of sort of saying why they were stepping away from it. I don't have it right here, but I remember kind of reading it and being interested in how they handled it. And I thought do you remember that?
I seem to remember they had made a shoe for him, and then Kanye got a little weird for a little bit, and they're kind of like, yeah, we're not going to make that shoe. And I don't remember the whole thing, but I do remember like what you're referencing.
But they didn't just stop, right? You have to have a point of view, and you have to take, and again, you may not be right. You may not, I think you just have to acknowledge that you're changing and you're doing something for certain reasons. And I think that's just so important. And especially in today's day and age where, people are on social and up to the minute. I mean, I think life has changed significantly in the last, few years, but in the last 20 years. I mean, You could actually have news about your brand and just be hopeful that, if you just stayed quiet for a while, then no one would know, right, about it. But I think today, it's not that difficult to get people to, and to get brands to really be much more transparent, identifying like why they have made a change. And so I think today the responsibility really lies on whether it's the, individual that's a brand or the actual, company that's a brand. I think that it's important to take people with you in order to, maintain that trust.
It's a really great book, by the way. I think it was David Novak that wrote that book, Taking People With You. Oh my gosh. But I think when we look at how the economy has changed too, I'm interested to kind of hear, we're looking at brands and we're looking at how, social media has changed things. What do brands need to focus on in the future now as we're kind of moving into a new era of media to communicate to their public? Because I think, to me, and I may be totally wrong about this, I think the influencer idea is getting played out a little bit. I think the way people are communicating is changing. How do brands change to communicate the right way as well?
Well, I think that it hasn't changed. There are segments of it in terms of how people are getting their information, obviously, that are changing. But I think making sure that you stay with your existing audience is really critical. And I think it's also really important to be aware of what's going on around you. So I think that there's words, there's messaging that you want to, make sure, even if that isn't necessarily, your audience. I don't think you want to jump in and act like you're supporting a certain group of people, for example, when you've never shown that you've ever supported them over time. Like, I think that's another piece. So you can't go, for example, looking at, a brand, for example, like Hint, you can't be in, focusing on a consumer that is primarily female and millennial, and then all of a sudden just only start focusing on Gen Z. Because you've heard Gen Z is like, you have to figure out, how do you storytell around that, and how do you bring in like the reason why you're focusing on this group of people, and why you think that you could solve a problem for that group of people as well. Otherwise, I think you come off as being, very inauthentic. I mean, we're in a time right now, again, where I think that it's also, even if you think that there's only a small percentage of people who think a certain way, those people could be your loudest and your worst nightmare on social, right? And I think that you just have to, and you have to be ready to defend sort of why you're acting that way too. That if you just think, oh, well, it's not going to be a problem. If you think that there's a possibility of something being a problem too, I think that, you really have to be prepared to speak to that. And if you're not, as a, CEO, as a CMO, then I think that that's, it's going to bite you in the butt.
Kara, you're having a lot of conversations. You're working on a lot of cool stuff. I'm curious, what are you most excited about right now? Like, what are you most jazzed out about in what you're doing?
I think for me, I started my podcast, which you are going to be a part of that as well. But it's called the Kara Goldin Show, and I'm interviewing amazing CEOs and leaders. It's interesting hearing about or some of your questions that you were asking in terms of the focus. I when I first started the podcast 8 years ago now, I was really focusing on female entrepreneurs and female founders, and some of them were CEOs, some of them weren't CEOs. And what I realized, I mean, it was great to start somewhere, but what I realized over time is, for example, there's incredible men that are also founders as well, that have a lot of incredible viewpoints, that I felt like I was confusing the consumer, because while they wanted to hear from women, the core thing that they wanted to hear was from people who were building businesses and founders who were disrupting. And so what I get most excited about is that I hear over and over again from so many people that I'm interviewing, I've never been asked that question before. And so if I can actually bring content to people from amazing, smart people who are typically founders, most of the time they're leading these companies, and I'm asking them questions about building businesses. When did you think this company was going to go under? How do you think about competition? How do you build boards? How do you raise money? Things that I think are operator type of questions. That's what gets me most excited, because I feel like if I can actually help people beyond helping them get healthier, if I can help them know that they're not alone, that they can actually go out and challenge the status quo. They don't have to have worked for, Coca-Cola or Pepsi if they're going to go start a beverage company. They can actually, it ends up that most of the most amazing founding stories and companies out there are from somebody who just had an idea that had a lot of tenacity and resilience and decided that they were just going to go for it. So that's really what I'm super excited about now. And I'm incubating some other companies too that I'm not quite ready to talk about, but it's a lot of fun.
I got to say too, though, I have enjoyed a lot of your conversations with female founders. There is a woman I've been following for a couple years now since you interviewed her. She has a company called Belgian Boys Pancakes.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my! So I have discovered some cool founders from your show. I will say that, but I can say as well. I think also part of the game is it's not just helping people, but it's also keeping yourself engaged too, if that makes sense. Because I know even for me, like, you know, what I've wanted to talk about, what I've wanted to discuss has shifted over the years too. So like even now we have two shows. We have the Command Your Brand show where we talk about business and branding and things I really want to go deep on. But then, you know, my main show has changed from Create Your Own Life to the Jeremy Ryan Slate show, where now we just talk about culture and politics and families. And so it's, I think as well, it's, you want to help people, but you also want to like keep yourself engaged. I think it's part of the game, you know?
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think that, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, when you start to see, I mean, this kind of goes full circle back to what we were talking about initially. Like as you start to just do, right? You start somewhere, and as you start to learn about your audience and learn about maybe the segments of problems that you're solving for them, or the discussions that are most relevant where people, you know, are not getting that information anywhere else, then I think that's where you're allowed to go and branch out. Two shows, two different brands. And I think there's decisions to be made too, that you have to figure out, you know, was I right or wasn't I right? I was interviewing Tony Robbins on my show the other day, and I didn't
see that. Dean Graciosi and Tony you had on, correct?
Yeah, and they're amazing, but I did not realize, I mean, they're both amazing, but I didn't realize that Tony has started 114 companies.
Wow.
And I know, which was crazy. That's not what he's known for. And I was asking him, like, when do you shut a company down? Because he doesn't have 114 companies today, right? So, you know, when do you shut it down? And how do you know? And, you know, like you go and try different things just to see whether or not they're working. But how do you do it? Because sometimes you're going to say, okay, my audience, you know, wants this from me, but maybe it's just not getting the traction that you really wanted. And then you just decide to, you know, do something else. I think owning something, it doesn't mean that it's a failure. It means that you're setting up some sort of metrics, you know, and that can happen at the beginning. I think it can happen as you're, you know, building it, and you're going to say, you know, I thought it was here, but it wasn't. It wasn't as, you know, needed, I guess. And I wasn't solving a big enough problem for people or whatever it is. Anyway, I think it's also kind of interesting, right?
Yeah.
So I think that, you know, if you can actually, it's sort of like going and doing a project on yourself to see whether or not you're critiquing yourself enough. And I think that the more experience you have in being able to do that, the better you get at it. So.
Absolutely. Well, Kara, I've really enjoyed this conversation. For people listening, how can they connect with you? How can they find you? How can they check out your podcast?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's all over Apple, Spotify, the usual, and it's the Kara Goldin Show, and I'm all over social as well at Kara Goldin.
Very cool. Well, Kara Goldin, I appreciate getting to talk branding with you, because you've built a cool brand and you're doing some very cool things out there. So thanks again for coming back on today.
Thank you.
And if you guys are brand new to this channel, like this video, leave us a comment and smash that subscribe button if you want to command your brand, and we'll catch you guys next time.